order at 7:07.
Yeah, good evening. It's 7:08, and we're at the old schoolhouse with an open space. You see, they have the old name, but I think it's fair to say it's officially the Open Space Committee meeting on Thursday, May 4th at 7:08 p.m. I'd like to officially call the meeting to order. I want to acknowledge who's here on site in person with us. Let me begin by welcoming Bev.
Thank you.
Bev Littman, thank you for joining the committee. This is your first, I shouldn't say your first because you've probably been involved in many other committees many times, but you have not?
No, I
Oh
just
my-
go for weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Other than sit at meetings.
We're so honored to have you officially on a town committee. Thank you for honoring us in this way. I also want to acknowledge that Betsy Morgenthaler is here, and we're so grateful that you're
First time in person.
first time in
Thank you.
person. Yes, thank you. And our esteemed vice chair, Christian's here, and then also our long serving and greatly valued secretary, Nona. And this is Terry. For the time being, the chair. I want to acknowledge that Gary Nielsen unfortunately couldn't make it, but he let us know. And that Ward Payne unfortunately can't make it, but he also let us know. And I also want to acknowledge that Ward has indicated that he is going to be confirming his desire to step down as a regular committee member. He would still happily volunteer as an advisory member, as he has in the past, but I also want to go log that for. And we thank Ward for his many years of service, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Okay. We have lots of things on this agenda, so I'd like to get going, if we may. I'd like to acknowledge the second agenda item is oral communications for anything that's not on the agenda. So before we dive into the agenda, does anyone here have anything they want to add to the agenda that we missed? No? Great.
I'd
Oh, yeah,
like to make one comment, which is that conservation committee is interested in putting together some kind of a list of conservation easements in town. And I think that overlaps with some of the traditional responsibilities of open space. So they would like to reach out to this committee and work together on that going forward.
It sounds like there may be some follow-up to explore what that collaboration is. Okay. Anything else? No? Okay, let's dive into the next agenda item, committee leadership. Just to explain what that is, it is totally customary that we look at rotating leadership periodically, and periodically is today for this committee. And so I wanted to open up the conversation to see if we have any volunteers or folks who want to volunteer or nominate a colleague to take on any of the chair, vice chair, or secretary roles.
I would nominate our vice chair to be rotating chair.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Duly noted, and that will acknowledge that nomination. Just wanted to check and see if there were any other nominations for any other role. You have to fill all of those roles. Or any other volunteers. You can nominate other people or volunteer or nominate yourself.
I nominate Betsy as vice chair.
Actually, you as vice chair.
I decline. But thanks.
I would be willing to serve. I'm not enthusiastic about serving, but I'm very willing to serve.
Okay.
I'm enthusiastic about this committee, and I will serve it in whatever capacity we collectively decide. To be true.
Chair of this committee? Vice
Because
chair.
it looks like it's done, unless Terry wants to say. I'll be happy to serve as vice chair.
Okay, I think I don't know enough about it to do it. Next,
Fair
next 6
enough.
months.
All right, I will take my turn.
Okay, great. And then maybe I'll ask or propose or nominate if Nona be willing to continue to serve as secretary of the committee.
Yeah, I'm happy to rotate off if anyone else is inclined to do this.
When it comes down to the discussion of the minutes, it's one of the questions that will be asked later on. I call them known as super summary minutes. I
Oh.
don't-
Well,
Well, that might seal the deal.
Yeah.
As in Nona, you're getting accolades for your excellent service as secretary. I know I would certainly enthusiastically nominate you and continue to support you if you'd be willing to serve in that way.
I'm willing to serve. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other comments, questions, or suggestions from anyone here?
When I rotate the chair position.
Great.
How does that sound?
It's not an obligation, obviously, but duly noted. Any other comments? I am happy to close that part of the conversation and then say, I want to acknowledge that we have on the table a proposal for Chisian to become the new chair of the committee. We have a proposal that Betsy will become the vice chair and Nona will remain as the secretary. I think since we have no other volunteers or suggestions, I'd like to see if we have, if we can do this properly, I'd like to offer or suggest that we accept that as the new slate. And would like to see if there's a second for that, and then we can take a vote. Because I did not hear any alternative proposals. Second from Bev. Can we take a vote and see all those in favor of that new slate?
Aye.
We have a unanimous decision from all those present, and we do have a quorum. So that is our new committee leadership. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you, Terry,
Oh,
for serving for a long and challenging chapter as chair. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I
Got us through the pandemic.
You did.
hardly-
And through a lot of things, actually,
hardly-
including the
Ah.
housing update.
It was my pleasure, and I really appreciate working with all of you in that capacity. I look forward to continuing to work with you. So, thank you. So in that spirit, let's continue the meeting, but we have a new leadership, so I'm going to suggest we turn it over to this end to continue to manage the rest of the meeting.
I was thinking maybe I would have a bit longer to get up to speed on Robert's rules before I was playing.
We're very forgiving bunch.
Yes, we'll do it together.
Okay. We'll do it. I think at this point,
The only thing I'm going to suggest is that everyone really bring the mic to your mouth because otherwise it won't be recorded.
Just that they are super.
Known as Superman.
I did read them and I have no corrections.
then I would ask for a motion.
I move to approve them as drafted. Second,
Second. Because it's approved, no?
We'll move to our old business. 5A, the committee charter. update. I don't know who's giving that.
I'll acknowledge just because I worked with Craig and Jeff to get that scheduled with the council and then voted on that. They appreciate the diligence we took in considering the prior charter, the subcommittee in drafting updates, and then the consultation we had among the committee before it was proposed to the council. And the council did review it at their council meeting. And that, did you have a question or comment?
I do.
Oh, please.
Yeah, I do.
Go
I
for it.
I was listening to some of the charter changes that were proposed. Basically to simplify things.
Yeah.
You know, eliminate duplication. But is there a copy that I can see?
Sure, it's in the actual council minutes from that meeting. I'll have to get the reference.
Okay,
Yeah, but it was from, now it feels like a month or so ago because just of the passage of time and the slight delay in our own meeting. But I'll get that specific council meeting date. And the council, to my understanding and recollection, reviewed all of our proposed changes and accepted them, which is why I made the reference to the official committee meeting, as well as some of the other key changes were really just streamlining the charter itself to remove references to subcommittees and duties that were no longer applicable, and to I think just reorganize the responsibilities. Yeah,
Just a quick question then. So your understanding is that the council actually voted to approve the charter? And if so, I'm just curious about the date because I might have missed that. I saw them approve that as a member of the committee, but I might.
totally separate.
Yeah, good. So
It's
I'm
totally
glad to
separate
hear that.
consideration.
So the fact that our committee name is still registered as the old committee name and there's no charter available, it's just the short staff.
I think it might be because obviously there was a transition in both the
It's quite possible.
Yeah. both the clerk and other parties. But again, I'll get all the specific dates.
Great.
The,
Great to hear.
yeah, Bev's appointment got disaggregated from the charter consideration. They actually approved that first and then at one meeting and then came back to review the charter because we were cleaning up our edits and approvals as a committee, not just as a subcommittee.
so wrap up on that. We need to check the date. of
Yeah,
the
well, just so
council
we
meeting.
can put it in there.
Yeah, okay, okay. Thanks.
So I don't know if there's anything else that people want to address. It was mostly, I think, a confirmation of the name, the regular meetings, as opposed to every meeting being ad hoc. So we have regular, in general, every other month meetings. Some subject obviously to confirmation. And then most of the other, I think, edits were around, as I suggested, deleting things that were actually no longer applicable. And then streamlining and improving. I have to credit Betsy and others for really, everybody, but Betsy was the leader of the subcommittee, to be frank. And so we thank everyone for that. That's all I have for the update.
I think I happened in February 2nd.
N- No, that's the approval of our minutes.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that's when
right.
we, as a committee, re-review the draft of the subcommittee and then approve sending it to the council. Sorry. And what I'm gonna do is get the date of the council meeting that it was finally approved at, so that we can approve. That's my update.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Terry, very much for that. So our next item is the open space brochure mailing update, which is a familiar agenda item. None of you have that?
I don't know what the status is.
I'm not sure I know the status of it either. So,
That's something to have to work on.
okay. After the last meeting, I made contact basically at Craig's prompting, I guess, with the mailer that was going out from emergency preparedness. And it turns out that they are doing something entirely different from what we are doing, although it looked like that might provide an example. But I guess we have to go through the post office still. And we also need to get a budget to the town council, I think fairly soon. I think it's due next week, maybe. And so we need to have in that budget whatever it will cost to produce and mail this flyer, if that's what we choose to do.
And then is that information sitting between you and Gary?
It was Craig who suggested that I contact the person on EPC who is doing a mailer, but theirs is in conjunction with Woodside Fire, and Woodside Fire is handling the cost, I believe. I could have that wrong. I'd have to look up my notes, but they are actually mailing something to each mailing address in town because they're providing information on their evacuation route. Whereas ours is one thing that goes to everybody in town.
So you've reminded me that at one point we were, not Craig, but recommended we speak with Carrie, who is one of the key communications team members. We did. She directed us to the printer that she uses, the town uses. And she directed us to the post office in Menlo Park, the main post office in Menlo Park, which is the main post office that the town uses to distribute official town communications. We contacted them, confirmed that the process to bulk mail that the town uses, and Carrie suggested that it might be easiest if we wanted the town's assistance to use the town's printer, because they were accustomed to working with the Menlo Park post office that does the town's official mailing. And that, as Nona mentioned, we just needed to confirm that we had a committee budget, and that because apparently one wasn't given to us for the current fiscal year, that if we proposed a budget for the coming fiscal year, which by the way starts very soon, it's June 37th or July 1st. If we proposed one now or soon to the manager and the town manager and the town council, that it could be included in the budget review process for the upcoming 2023-24 fiscal year. And that, frankly, that timing might coincide very nicely with the final review and costing and whatnot of of the brochure, which is pretty much ready to go, I think. Including, we checked, I think, the form factor that is both not eligible, which is a peculiarity that we need to be attentive to. And I think we may even have a budget conversation on the agenda tonight. Can't remember if we do. That might give us the runway to reach back out to the town staff now that we have an acting town manager and assistant town manager to see if we can get into the budget review process.
Do we have a number?
It is a plug number, so we do have a number.
I had understood in the past that we had used a budget of around $2,500 or $3,000 for this committee. Now, we did not need it for many years because we didn't have this action item. And now that Craig's here, he can maybe remind us because he has a lot of institutional memory. And I'd agree that if we can remember what that placeholder was, I recall that Carrie mentioned a number not dissimilar to what we had kept in the past as a placeholder for mailing, which gives me some comfort that if we make that request, that it's very probable we'll be able to get the mailing within that amount. Though I would note that I understand U.S. postal rates are going up again, so that we might want to round up in our recommendation for the budget.
Inflationary environment being what it is.
It is. Yeah. Greg, I don't know. Welcome, Greg. Our council representative on open spaces arrived now too. Craig, we were just talking about, we're exchanging an update with each other about the work done, open space brochure, which is almost ready to launch. I think there's a movie with that name, but anyway, almost ready to launch. And one of the to-dos we had working with Carrie from the town communications team was to work through the town staff to get a budget for this committee for the upcoming 23-24 fiscal year, submitted and hopefully reviewed and approved by council, so that we could use that budget to get the mailing out. Because apparently for some reason we did not have a budget for the current 22-23 fiscal year. And the question for you, sir, is hopefully we still have time to submit something for the 23-24 year. And if you recall at all what the typical budget had been previously for this committee for things like this type of mailing. That's right, beginning in July. We asked town staff at the time, and they said they didn't have a record of this committee having a budget. And I wouldn't say they specifically declined to find money in the town budget, but they didn't volunteer it. They suggested this other path. Yeah, I don't want to speak for Titian or anyone else, but I'm just describing to you what happened in our journey. And we also respectfully acknowledge that there were a lot of things going on over the last number of months. So.
To this, and assuming you contact with the person who has the exact information, you can use that number. In the absence of that, can we add to the $2,500 for last year 2,500 or $3,000 for this year going forward so that we're going to submit it as one budget report?
Let's do this, Betsy. Let's say that I am going to follow up now with Craig and the town manager as a new person asking under a new set of circumstances. Hey, let's get this money as soon as we can if there's around because we have this amazing brochure. Let's see how that goes. If not, the plan B will be to make sure that we can get the money in the next round. What I'm going to do for the purposes of the agenda, which is so neat, is to say, table this for a minute. Let me just tell you about Open Space website that we're working on it. Gary and I are working on it, and I've been in the archives, and we've been looking at other websites that do this, and we are going to present to this committee. It'll probably be rolling. I think we'll get some descriptions up, some version of the website, and then we'll make it better rather than making it perfect before we put it up. And so if there are any questions, I don't know, Bev, if you heard much about this idea. No. So the idea is that the open spaces will have dedicated websites with information about them, encouraging folks to come, telling people where they are, photographs, so that we have a presence on the town website and also more of a presence maybe in the imagination. So this is to be continued as we work on it. Can I speed now to our annual budget new business agenda item?
The only other thing I would add
Yes.
is to keep in mind that Carrie Chin was quarterbacking some of the logistics of this, including the printer and the post office connection. So
Okay.
if that you're discussing
Yes.
things with the interim town manager or Gary or anyone else, just to keep in mind that she was a constituent and facilitator.
Thank you so much. I think that's very helpful to have that name.
Yeah, and well, I don't know if this is about budget or if this is about the brochure, but
Let's
Um,
do it as budget.
okay.
Let's continue our brochure conversation under the
As
budget.
Okay. So when Craig suggested that I talk to Jerry Sheffrin, I asked him how much their brochure was going to cost now, and he said he wasn't sure, but it was 3,000 to 5,000. But that's, again, that's individually addressed envelopes so that each one would have its appropriate Zone Haven number assigned to it. Right, and we ended up scaling it down from 9 by 12, I think, which is what the printer, the Oak Reed printer had said. And Menlo Park, I think, required 8.5 by 11. So it's in the right form factor now, and it's just two-sided flat.
So
Yeah.
great. I'll follow up with you about that and I'll ask the town or you'll ask the town what we can find. Wonderful. I probably will need your guidance, Carrie, in this part because I've never been through a committee budget process before. I don't know. Well, yeah, we've been talking about signs, but I think that's a pretty long way out and there wasn't necessarily a consensus about it. I don't even know if we had other mailings in mind. I don't have a sense of what our wish list would be.
I don't recall that we had in any of our recent conversations either to do this of that nature. I had understood that, for example, our work on the website update was really about content that we or volunteers were going to propose that the Carrie or the staff could help us actually execute. And so that wasn't going to require, perhaps hiring a third party. So I don't recall that we had other foreseeable in the near term out-of-pocket expenses. And I agree with your characterization that other discussions, things about potential physical signs and whatnot, were really in the very early conversation stage, not in the implementation.
Budget process with this town other than hearing. and going to finance. So at this date, they get in touch with Cindy, and she has a strong support person working with her right now with Jeremy's departure.
I can find it.
Oh,
You were gonna say something, Beth?
I have a file of when the open space fund started in the town. Does that help at all with reading or anything?
Yeah, you talked about, you were thinking about the website?
Yeah.
Yes, anything you have, because the more robust it is, the better it works.
Right. And where does the utility users tax fit in with? That's different. subject. Okay. I know that. Well, no, I thought it had to do with open space. Oh, okay.
But not what
Not
our,
on the agenda.
yeah, I think we're just thinking very narrowly about our committee's budget right now, which is different than
Okay, all
the
right.
pocket of money that people associate with our committee. Which okay. All right, so I guess what I'm wondering is, and maybe Craig knows about this, do committees with budgets do better by having continuous budget requests? Like if we go away for a year, is it harder to get back on the radar screen? Like, do we think about? Okay. Okay.
I think one thing I've been counseling the committees that I'm liaison for is, my guess is next budget year is going to be tight. So when we loop back around, put stuff you think you need, but make sure you put like, here's what we think we're going to do. When somebody goes back and starts looking to compare, if it's like, oh, this seems just like a random request, those are the kind of requests that are likely just to sort of disappear. And this process happens fast enough that, I would reach back out to you guys to ask, but it's not like it's going to come back here and have 4 more discussions before it gets finalized. You're going to propose something. We're going to look at the sort of larger picture. We're going to try to winnow this thing down to make it work. Because we got a big increase coming from the sheriff's contract, for instance.
Okay.
And we've got a lot of money that we spend on the housing element, and we've got more money to spend. So this is going to, I think, going to be a much tighter fiscal year coming up than we've seen. So
Sounds like we would only ask for a budget at this point if we can't find the money to do the brochure.
yeah, well, if you think you're going to do another, like say we do this brochure, and then if you think you're going to do another one, then I think it's okay to ask. If you think you have a plan for it, I definitely ask. I'm not saying don't ask for money, but don't just say, oh, let's put $5,000 in as a placeholder because maybe we'll spend it. Like that's going to be hard to justify when we get to it. So, if you think that there is, at the picnic or, if there's some other outreach you want to do and you think there's money involved there, or if we think we want to, my gut says that by the time we get this open space brochure out that's been worked on forever, which is, I know it's frustrating to everybody, it's taken this long, that I don't know that you need to get another one out right away. Because our goal was to sort of remind people that the open space group is here and that we care about open space and we have this fund. And, we only need to remind people probably every couple of years. So, if we get this one out in June, then, maybe we could wait a year and do the next one. So I think that sort of just reminding people that the open space committee exists probably isn't as important. But if you think you guys would do outreach or something, or, you think it's important to get something at a picnic or some other event and there's stuff you want to print up, those are the kind of things I definitely consider.
The only other thing I would add to this is I know from sharing trails and paths in the past that we used to get an annual reminder of when the budget process was going on, and we'd get prompted with there's a 1-pager. There used to be a 1-pager that had our prior year budget and then an opportunity to present a request for current year budget. And for some reason, maybe because this committee has recently been an ad hoc committee that doesn't meet regularly, only on an ad needed basis, that somehow we got left off the routine of being prompted for a regular annual budget. And I think that's an opportunity for us now that we have the runway to have regular meetings instead of just ad hoc meetings to be included in the customary query of annual budget requests. That doesn't mean, as Gary said, that we should make a request if we don't have a purpose for it, but that'll also help us get just on a regular schedule and be able to intentionally make a decision to propose a budget or not.
I'll definitely follow up on that. So I guess what I'm wondering is where the committee is right now with either letting this budget cycle go without asking for money because we don't know what it would be yet, or asking for what the cost of another brochure would be, thinking that we might do another one. I feel like Craig said we don't need to do it.
We seem to need a few year runway to get out another brochure, so I'm not sure.
What do you think?
I was not having any budget request in mind. I did not arrive with any. Please notice that traditionally, all the committees do use a plug number and it goes in, somewhere between $1,000 and a couple $1,000. Given what has happened to us this year, as well as I would tack on at least $1,000 to the request that we're going to come up with, a specific request that's going to match Craig or the emergency. So we have a little bit of cushion for the unexpected. Craig's point.
I guess I'm not convinced that the money is there to do the mailing that we are planning to do now. And if the next fiscal year starts, July 1, is that right? If we're not going to be able to get the money to do it now, then we should put it in the budget for next year and mail it on July 1st.
Or at least try. Or at least try.
Yeah,
Right.
right. So
Okay.
that would be my first thought. I also think it would be worth maybe adding a little to print additional copies, as well as anything else that we've used in the past that is really significant, because I'm going to channel Gary Nielsen, who's not here tonight, but he has said in the past that we really should have like a welcome wagon new neighbor package, so that people who move in after this mailing is made can get all this cool new stuff. So I don't know that there is anything other than the brochure, but it would be really nice to have enough copies to give out to new residents.
That warms my heart in the barn raising sense. And as I think of needs, with the staff being as rich with opportunities to spend their time in other ways, our website needs updating, quite seriously needs updating. We need to post minutes that will be posted. We need to post all the new minutes. We need to do the update on the charter amendments that we passed last February. I have thought that we might be able to recruit a college kid off, the summer IT guy to help post town things. It occurred to me. I don't know if that's kosher or not, but if it were, and I'm looking at our liaison, it'd be cool because I doubt we're the only committee that needs such help. So I'd put that out there and let the council at least hear out of that.
I will follow up with that as well. So in order to get into this budget cycle, I need to go to the interim town manager and the budget folks, and I need to do it pretty quick. This is the first I am hearing about any of this. Okay. We'll do it now. Okay, great. Then I will, on the behalf of the committee, follow up with that. I'll try and get some numbers quickly so that we have a good sense of what the brochure plus some amount of welcome wagoning and other access to brochures. There are good brochures, coal mine, right? There's lovely brochures on some trails. Anyway, moving on. It's easy to get off. Oh, is it okay for me to move on? Okay, great. So the Hawthorns edition, thank you for sending that information, Terry. I also don't know anything about this. Is this your item?
I'm happy to introduce it. I just want to acknowledge that there have been additional updates sent directly from the town about this. Hawthorns is the open space parcel on Alpine near the intersection of Alpine and Portola Road. And it's, I think, 80-ish acres or whatnot. And just so folks understand, it's a Mid-Penn Regional Open Space District parcel. It is considered an extension of the Windy Hill Open Space Preserve. They are, in their incredibly professional fashion, taking a very deliberate and inclusive process. They're initiating one process to consult with constituents, including Portola Valley residents and representatives, but not only, to discuss the future use of the parcel, including things like adjacency and access of trails, impact on traffic. It's a, in my editorial opinion, a very intentional, thoughtful process. And I understand that we're understanding how they intend to include official town council and or committee input. And they're also creating a specific Hawthorns open space advisory committee of a variety of different constituents. The links that have been distributed by the town, by Portola Valley on their behalf, include all the information about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and an invitation to apply, because that's the process, to apply to be a voting member of their actual committee that will review and ultimately approve or recommend to the Mid-Penn board. I should be clear on that, to make a recommendation to the Mid-Penn board about what exactly is going to happen there, when, and how. And so I found it to be really well organized and communicated process. We did. I did have an opportunity a month or so ago to listen in on a call at their invitation. That's where I'm getting this information. And we may have additional opportunities to participate as a committee of committees advisory. So
At what point will we know if we have a role?
So I have a question in through Corey to clarify, because Corey is the one that sent out some of this information most recently. And it's a question I've asked her before, because from what I've read in the actual Mid-Penn advisory committee application materials, they make reference to not wanting to include some official town entities because they are going to be included in a separate process, that their input. I don't know if that's changed, but that was the original position. So Corey has not gotten back to me on my most recent query about that. So I'm happy to transfer over that dialogue to you, Tizian, so that we can stay abreast of that. But the whole point was just that if we were going to have an opportunity to listen in and provide input directly, because we're a committee of the town, that we might actually be, as individuals, might actually be asked not to apply for the other committee that they're organizing for obvious reasons. And that was just a point of clarification I thought would be helpful.
Is there a sense that the town would like us to be? Council would like us to play a role? I'm sorry.
I mean, without knowing what all these committees are and what their purpose is, it's pretty hard for me to answer that. I would say if somebody from the committee can make sure that they go when they're public, I mean, because MidPen has these, I'll say public hearings. I don't mean that in the very technical sense of a hearing, but I mean, they have these public meetings. And I think it'd be great if, one or more people from the committee went to that, because those are open to the public. And having you guys collect that input to make sure that the town's aware of whatever's going on, that's critical. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. In terms of this advisory committee, I think, if it's a citizens advisory committee and it's not supposed to be governmental, then we probably don't want to have this committee get involved in that. But if we get to the point where they're asking for a town representative, then I think we need to figure out why they're asking us. I mean, because if they're asking us for, like, we want to talk about fire risks and other, because that's one of the things that they do, then we may want somebody on staff that basically is always there. On the other hand, if we need somebody to represent the town values and report back and make sure that the council stays informed, then yeah, I think you guys would be great. So let's kind of keep our ear to the ground and figure out what it is. But if certainly somebody can do like Terry did and at least get on the Zoom call and hear what they have to say, I think that would be really
Okay.
critical.
So
So,
in-
yeah.
in certain places, is that like
I did attend 3 meetings prior to the invitation that Kurt put out more recently. It is proceeding, as you say, in a very disciplined approach, and their runway is very long.
Three-
Um,
2 to 3 years.
And that's where I kind of thought, but as I saw it, the major issues that are they're up, but they're not rising quickly, but they're up, are the continuation of the Alpine Trail on the side of the Hawthorne side of the road, which would be very important to the town. And secondly, and very important to the town, is the ingress egress, whether they're going to use the 800 Los Trancos site as the main parking, or whether they would go up the more steep driveway located across the street, essentially from the Roberts of Woodside exit.
And are they talking about that? Because
The Portola Valley. They're
Right.
talking about those two possibilities.
yeah.
But not actively, no decisions
Right,
going to happen
right.
anytime soon. But as I heard them, I thought it was a role for BPTS on the parking and egress side and for
Trails.
our trails,
Yeah.
more than for open space, as this is mid-10 and we're kind of open space. However, I am interested in Hawthorne generally and able to tap into some of the meetings.
do we have a subcommittee of people on this committee who are tracking for us? And maybe if one of you can't
Well,
attend. maybe-
And the other thing you might do is you might have somebody be your designate and have an alternate. And if that person can't make it, they can just say, hey, I can't make this. Can you make it? I mean, you can keep it pretty casual. But yeah, I think if you can kind of keep your ear to the ground on this one, I think that would be great. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, there's a ranger resident up that driveway across from Roberts. So that's why I was curious whether they were looking to do something there.
Why don't I agendize a subcommittee question mark for this, since we have a slow boil or slow some cooking metaphor that I can't make right now. Okay, thank you so much for that.
I will just note that I almost heard Betsy volunteer to be our representative.
I'm almost hearing Terry.
But the other thing I was just.
We
gonna-
have
I'll
a
be- I'll be,
designate and
one
an
of the
alternate.
members. I
Oh,
will be
okay,
one
so
of
it just happened. Lovely.
I just got,
The
but
other
I'm
thing,
I'm 50%, right?
I was just gonna also acknowledge that Betsy's intuition that bicycle and trails would be interested parties jives with the fact that those were the two other committees that were on the informational calls. For trails, thinking specifically not just about trails on Hawthorne, but the Alpine Trail, particularly as it pertains to a safe routes to school trail that current students of Corte Madera and Ormondale, for that matter, use that trail to go back and forth. And then bicycle and pedestrians, because there was quite a bit of attention placed on the notion that there is not just that off-road trail that I think is bike permissible because it's a safe route to school trail, but also because there is a bike lane on the road there in front which they have records of close misses and actual accidents and all kinds of things. So there's quite a bit of sensitivity and attention in a positive way to being responsible about the way we manage ingress, egress, and parking. So that's it. Got it. 100%.
Well, I thank you for filling in the important details.
Good. Okay, I think we have that covered.
Just for the record, so do we have a subcommittee or do we have a designated person and an alternate?
You guys.
One volunteering to be an alternate? Well,
I think we
we
already
if we have
volunteered,
an
Terry.
open space. we're
I
not
don't-
alternate the part.
I don't know what a subcommittee, what would it mean to call it a subcommittee or just a designated person?
We got to talk offline. We'll talk.
Okay, we're gonna call it a designated person. What do you think, guys?
That's okay.
A volunteer.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we've got Betsy and as our
I have
alternate.
opinions about that. I should keep shut my mouth while I'm there. I'll just go and listen.
So
So
I think we're
Deb,
calling it a designated person. Is it Betsy and then Doug will be the alternate? And then- Designated what? Excellent. Another agenda item.
Great. So we'll flip it to old business. Yeah. Good idea.
Okay, so our next item, I also don't know very much about, and I'm guessing someone here knows about the changes that are being proposed to the committee structure.
I attended the meeting, but the chairing the meeting is our liaison.
Mhm.
This is, we're on the subject of simplifying. Oh, okay.
Yes. The background.
So it's so teed up that
I don't want to bias you guys. So I think it wants to be your discussion, not mine, because I'm really only doing this as a council person to try to simplify the committees to make it more flexible for volunteers. That's my only goal in this. And so it really gets down to, and Betsy, do you want to introduce it? You want me to just go through it? I mean, how do you?
well, I would like you to go through it, and when we talk about more flexibility to volunteers, can you include the transparency piece?
Sure. So the goal, for me to start at the top, so we had a meeting of committee chairs or their designate, which, let me tell you, it's almost impossible to get that many people together at any one day in time, but we keep trying. And the goal was to simplify some of the committee structure stuff. I mean, right now, we've got some committees that aren't able to meet because of Brown Act, like they can't get their quorum together. And then we've got other people that are traveling on sort of a moment's notice, and then they can't be part of the committee process, and on it goes. So what we had proposed was that there are Brown Act committees, and that's what we have today. So that would just be exactly what we have today. And those committees are all basically approved by the council, by the full council. And typically, new members are recommended by the chair to the mayor, and then the mayor, basically with concurrence of the council, seats somebody on a committee. When we do that, it is a Brown Act committee by definition. Okay, and that means that you can't, like, now that the emergency order has been lifted, you no longer attend by Zoom unless you post your address and put a piece of paper outside the door, keep the door so the public can enter, and you have to be ADA compliant. So those are,
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
about that? Because this is an important point, I
Yeah.
think, because it's one of the biggest selling points is that you can be somewhere else.
Yeah.
If you post that, say, on your front door
Yeah.
of your home.
Yeah.
it's permissible if you get it up 72 hours in advance?
I don't even, I think it just has to be before the meeting. It just has to be where somebody, like in your case, you have a gate out front. So you probably have to put it out there so somebody could come up and say, oh, I'm at the right place, know that they could push your buzzer and you would buzz them in.
And the purpose of this is for what?
It's,
It's kind of an odd rule, I mean, you can comply, but
Yeah.
it does afford the flexibility, therefore, to have hybrid meetings where if someone has to quarantine, they can.
yeah, the ADA is the one that's tough. Yeah, That's the one that's tough. Like my house, there, I could never comply. I mean, I guess we could sit in my driveway. But then I guess I still wouldn't have an ADA facility. So that generally, and then there's a bunch of people who really don't want to post because it does get posted in your minutes. Right, or on your agenda, sorry, your address. And that, that it'll be open and you have to let anybody and any member of the public who wants to come in. So it's definitely,
Lonely Hearts Club.
it could be, yeah. So, yeah, some new dating app, like, yeah, have remote, so the idea was we have Brown Act committees. We had proposed two other kinds of committees, a non-Brown Act committee, which would be very much in line with what we do with the Brown Act. In other words, you would still have an agenda and you'd still have minutes. The goal is to still have the same kind of transparency. This is not let's start doing things in secret. But like in Brown Act committees, technically, if you don't have a quorum, is my understanding is that the committee shouldn't meet. Even if you don't agree on anything, you shouldn't meet and discuss. You should just go home. Whereas the thing we're thinking like non-Brown Act, it's like maybe if you don't get a quorum, maybe you can still sit because you've noticed it, you could still sit and meet and talk and stuff. You couldn't, have votes and pass things, but at least you could still have discussions. And then if somebody had to travel, that they could basically be on Zoom and through a Zoom call and they could still vote. They could still count against your quorum. Whereas in a Brown Act, unless they've done all this noticing that we're talking about, they can, as a member, they can be a member of the public and they can kind of watch and you can listen to their comments, but they can't vote and they can't count toward your quorum. And then the last thing we, for lack of a creative name, we called it a group. And that was meant to be a much more casual. People just kind of got together. We didn't worry about quorums. We didn't really worry about whether they had agendas and minutes and stuff, but the town recognized them, as, yeah, these are people who are doing, so maybe the historic resources, where they want to get together and they just want to chat about, oh, let's write up some more stories or whatever they want to do. And do you really need to notice that 72 hours in advance and things like that? So, but that we could still, as a town, provide them resources in terms of meeting places, put their, meeting time up on the calendar, that kind of stuff. So those are sort of generally the three buckets. And, I'll say like questions that have been asked, as we bring this up, people are starting going, well, what's my liability as a volunteer committee member? Is it different for Brown Act committees versus non-Brown? And the answer is, I don't know, but that's it's a good question to ask. So that's the sort of general thing. Other stuff I've heard, some of the public safety, like the wildfire committee feels like they should be a Brown Act because they want to be seen as following the highest level standard of law there is, just because they feel like they're dealing with critical issues in the town. Whereas the Emergency Preparedness Committee sort of talked about it this morning, and they were like, a non-Brown Act committee could work for us. It would let some of our committee members that are traveling all the time participate. So even within the public safety set of committees, we've got some differences going on. So I think am I missing anything critical?
Nothing critical, and I'm glad you presented it because your spin is positive and onward looking. My concern that I expressed at the collective meeting is our fiduciary responsibility as we have some level of oversight for the open space fund. And I would think the same is even more true for the finance committee. And to me, if you have fiduciary responsibility, there's a higher level of public interest and access and need to know. And so the Brown Act and the transparency issues, I think, are far more heightened in those circumstances. So I responded at the collective, not exactly on behalf of the committee because I didn't check in with any of you beforehand. I was nominated to go, as none of the rest of you were able to attend.
Last person standing.
Yeah, exactly. But I said, if this is a good idea, it will still be a good idea in a year or two. And the issues that we're facing right now, particularly with the loss of one of our most precious resources, or at least the impending vulnerability of our most precious resource for park, and
And
equal
open space.
pressure on the fund itself. I thought it was an inauspicious time for us to step into a less transparent role with the interest of the public.
Where we are in the process of,
So we're trying to get another committee of committees. I think it's the 31st of this month to get the feedback. So this is the feedback that we're looking for. I can respond to a couple of things that you're saying. And this is in no way to say, oh, let me counter you, but just, I mean, one thing I would say is, given our committee structure, there is no committees that make decisions that don't get reviewed by Brown Act committee. Right, because it either goes to ASCC, planning, or the town council, and they will always be Brown Act. I mean, that's never going to be a decision. So in that sense, when you say fiduciary, it's a sort of a soft fiduciary. I mean, you're making a recommendation, but the council as the Brown Act could say, nope, not happening. So there can be that discussion as well. So that's not to say that if you guys are comfortable staying in the Brown Act environment, that wouldn't be a good thing. I just feel like we do have a backstop for that. So I don't feel as uneasy about that. In some ways, my sense is, if you're a committee, you're not having problems with quorums, you don't mind getting your, agendas and everything in early, and you're okay with the format of the minutes and stuff, then you're probably okay and you really don't need to change. And then if, to Betsy's point, if you feel like there's kind of this heightened, like, let's just, hold to the highest standard, then it's probably reasonable to stay. And that's where the wildfire preparedness kind of came out. That was sort of their opinion, was they weren't having problems meeting. So they didn't have this members being like EPC has that problem of members being on flights and stuff. But WPC didn't have that. And I'm not sure you guys have that. So, that may be the right way to think about this.
And I'm open clearly to what the rest of you think. Holding to the highest standard doesn't bring me joy.
Sure. Yeah.
It's really just in response to this particular moment in time and in the decision that we could revisit. I imagine at any time.
Yeah, my guess is it's probably an annual revisiting. I mean, because there are a few other kind of slightly crazy pieces to it. One of them is to be a non-Brown Act committee, we would need to appoint you from a subcommittee of the council, which doesn't have, in my mind, any real like active difference, but that's a technical legal difference, because if the whole council does it, you are a Brown Act by definition. Whereas if a subcommittee of the council does it, then it's okay. So that's just the way we sort of make it non-Brown Act under the law.
there's definitely a trick
Yeah.
somewhere.
and-
So,
Well, let me just ask one more thing and then please. The other thing I'd say, Betsy, is when you provide this feedback to the committee of committees, I think the other thing is to look at, the level of transparency. Because I guess I've always envisioned that the Brown Act and the non-Brown Act, that really the only two significant differences I see between them is that you could be on a Zoom call. I mean, maybe three. So you could be in a Zoom call without the rigmarole of the Brown Act. That some committees don't really like action minutes. And we went to action minutes because under Brown Act committees, they are these legal documents that kind of have standing and stuff. And you want to be real careful that they're exactly correct. And that's why they've gotten down to these pretty small, very concise. But as I always found as a committee member, I kind of went back and, read the minutes to kind of remember what happened in the meeting. And so the action minutes aren't very verbose.
For a Brown Act committee, we have a choice, right?
that's not clear. It's
It's actually, the reason why I believe we have a choice is that town council used to have verbatim minutes until just a couple of years ago. So that did not seem to be Brown Act dependent, and it seemed as though in the minutes here that as I have attended several other meetings, that they were opting into their choice. They were given a smorgasbord of choices and
Yeah.
choosing one.
So I don't know right now. My understanding is when Melissa got here, who was much more like, this is the way the Brown Act works and things started getting tight. Like, she was like, here's how you have to word your agenda. Right? So like, she has some very specific stuff. And she was also the one that was like action minutes for Brown Act committees.
Well, the
So-
planning commission though does have robust, fulsome, as our attorney Haskell says, fulsome minutes.
exactly.
And we don't have such verbatim minutes, but we do have more robust minutes than the action. minutes.
Right. And
Meaningful.
right. And all I'm suggesting is I don't know where that's going to come out for Brown Act committees.
Well,
Okay, so that's another potential. And it may be we can just keep it because Melissa's not here now. And I think at some level, we're probably saying, what we were doing before is pretty good. And, unless somebody really wants to go after us on pretty flimsy grounds, maybe it's okay.
Well, the other
Is it possible to have action minutes and sort of working documents or something that are internal to the committee and are just for the purpose of keeping us all on the same page about what we're doing?
And again, this is where at some point we need to get the attorney and say, here's the problem we want to solve. I mean, one thing we had pitched at the planning commission was to do something like have action minutes. And then as an attachment, so to speak, have the more verbose side. And we kind of tried that. The total verbose, like literally they were transcripts, they were pretty horrible. Because they were terrible because they were automatic translation. So they had errors in them. And a couple of us on the planning commission were uncomfortable approving minutes where you could read them and go, well, no, there's type. I mean, how can I approve this thing that's clearly has errors? So I just don't know. That's what I'm just trying to say that may be something that if you're a Brown Act committee might get tightened up. But then again, maybe we can mitigate for it by saying you can attach, something that says, here's a rough approximation of the meeting, but the legal part is these action minutes. That I'm not an attorney, but we could sort that out. I think again, having you guys bring what you think are the important issues to the committee of committees, that's what's really going to count. So I'm sorry, I talked way longer.
Fine, and so this is agendized for us because this is an opportunity to begin to think about and maybe give you some feedback about what we're thinking.
Well, it's an opportunity for you to give your representative your input and for them to bring it to the next committee of committees, because we're going to try to get this to gel.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not going to keep coming back over and over and over again.
They want a decision now.
No. So you've raised two, to me, important, I don't know. One is liability of
Right.
becoming a non-Brown Act, which is
Well,
not insignificant, and the other is around the minute. So I'm wondering how we can say what we want to do until we have some of those questions answered.
Well, I don't think you need to decide tonight whether you want to be Brown Act or non-Brown Act. I think you
Okay.
can bring to the committee of committees, look, we like the flexibility, but we're concerned about liability. We like the flexibility of minutes, whichever parts of this you like, I think it's fine just to come to the committees and say, these are the things we think are going to help us be better committees. And again, make it easier for us to do our job. And then the committees hopefully can take all this input and craft it into something where we can say, all right, we heard everybody, we got stuff from the attorney, we found these things, and then we'd end up defining the 3 buckets in a much more rigorous way.
I understand. So are you our delegate at this point?
I was the delegate for the first meeting. I think technically you would be the delegate.
Is that?
Well, other chairs came,
uh,
but you can delegate. That is your prerogative as the chair. So,
just getting used to it all.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then, so I'm wondering, now I'm understanding what's happening. I've heard this concern about transparency and the raising of our committee's specific position right now, which is, go ahead.
you can finish your sentence, but about transparency, I'd like to make one other point. Okay, okay. One other point that I picked up at the finance committee meeting when they were excited about the additional flexibility and the opportunity to not have to break down into subcommittees of small size, that they would begin to email amongst themselves and have conversations offline from the public. That was a transparency issue that for me was a bit of a red flag because I could see how finance committee in particular, but no matter what committee, you are now operating outside the public view. And so and so I did hear Councilmember Haskell speak up and say, so long as the council's going to need to give direction on that. And so I think that there are some things that people are imagining that I can't imagine will come to fruition.
Yeah, and I would agree. I probably would not approve a non-Brown Act committee structure that allowed people just to randomly meet. Like, I'd probably be okay if the committee wanted to meet in a living room and not have all the Zoom technology. Like, that probably wouldn't bother me as long as it was posted and people could come. But the idea of, emailing stuff and decisions and decisions that were in private. So, I'm just trying to sort of show that I could imagine there's some flexibility there of people meeting as long as it's noticed and the public can attend. But yeah, once you get into a majority of committee members chit-chatting and email, I agree that's not the level or the lack of transparency that I was imagining. I was imagining that the non-Brown Act committees would still hold to a very high standard of transparency.
Are there other things?
Yeah. I guess I feel that the only reason to be non-Brown Act for this committee in the past was sometimes it was hard to get a quorum. But now that we meet on a regular basis, even if it's every 2 months, we know when the next meeting will be and we can plan our lives around that rather than sort of having to sort of round up people ad hoc to have a meeting. So I personally don't see any reason to be non-Brown.
And this is up to you guys. I mean, because I agree. I mean, you guys, that's what I was saying. You guys seem like you don't have quorum problems. You don't have a problem meeting. I mean, there are other, like I said, there are other committees, they have quorum problems and, they have other issues. They're also not doing, the kind of stuff that you guys are doing. So that's why I say it's really up to the individual committees.
Are there other things that anyone on the committee wants to sort of bring forward before I probably presenting the committee at the next meeting?
I think we've been pretty. So I don't have a move away from China.
Great. Have you ever thought about it then? Okay. All right. Well, I feel like I have the pulse of the group a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much for
yeah,
making
no.
that presentation.
Yeah, no, and this is just what we were hoping is that the different committees could sort of think about their circumstances and think about how it, affects them. So this is great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there anything else that one of us wants to say before I move us to the next agenda? As a committee?
Well, that's what other committees have been doing. We could send you our answer. It says questions for committees to consider, so we don't need to drill down and answer everyone as others have. Right.
Would you be, I'm going to do it. It's not grammatical, so it's going to be hard for me to read. Does the alternative committee structure above seem like a step in the right direction? Is your committee open to changing to an alternative non-Brown Act body? If so, are the alternatives appealing or is there another alternative that would work for our committee? how should we handle hybrid meetings, Zoom participation for committee members and residents under the different structures? Type of minutes, thoughts on reducing required staff, given that we have 17 committees. Do you have ideas for increasing volunteer participation, and how can we make it easier? These are existential questions.
I have an idea for reducing committee size, because I thought of a couple committees that could be merged. Under community participation, I thought we could pull together a couple of committees. Were they willing and enthusiastic? I think it's called the Cultural Committee and the Science Committee. And then under emergency preparedness, I wondered why we couldn't fold in the lovely undergrounding, utility undergrounding committee, because that would be a way to prepare for emergency.
You've done some thinking about this.
Very
Why
well.
don't will you send to me your thoughts there, and I will share them when I report. Would I give Patty a sense of where our committee was? Is that the right way of managing that? Can you please email me that? Wonderful. Okay. Anyone got an initial response to that? All right,
I'm
I'm
not yucking it up a lot. Um,
I would actually love to know how many times the recordings are listened to or viewed. Okay.
And if you had an open space junkie that watched the same video 10 times, would that count as 1 or 10? Yeah, if they were clever.
my sense is that people are aware that we're being posted to a YouTube channel and comfortable with that. But that's something that I can keep an eye on as this goes forward. I'm desperately eager to move to our last agenda item, which is the status of the housing element, which leaving this to the end is a thing, isn't it? Again,
I have a question
Yes,
about Brown Act and Brown Act. Did you come to some?
I don't think that
consensus?
we've been asked to decide yet. I think the charge was that I was supposed to get a sense of this before the next meeting.
I see.
I would say though, Bev, that I've headed into the meeting with the sense that we seem to be pretty comfortable with our Brown Act-ness. How do you feel about that?
It just seems like a complication, but I understand the problems in the liability that you mentioned if you don't have the Brown Act. Go on with what it's going to be.
Let me go with the spirit, and I'll keep that. I think that all of us are wondering whether it would be nice to get rid of the complications or whether the Brown Act provides us a kind of cover that has value. So I'm thinking our sense is that the status quo is working for this committee, but we don't have to decide completely yet. And I'll be happy to report back after this next meeting.
So what is our status quo? Non-Brown Act? No, we're our Brown Act. Okay.
I will just say, as a point of clarification, I do think citizen listening or as a committee member, who happens to remote, but doing that via Zoom is actually in the sense of it just maximizes the flexibility and opportunity to be involved in the work. And I think that's the spirit in which we have done that. community members have participated in the past. And I do think that's constructive. Um, and so anything we can do to preserve that flexibility as long as the town feels comfortable allowing it. Not for us specifically, but generally. Um, I personally think it's a good thing. And I also think that all of us have enough sensitivity and appreciation for conducting ourselves in an appropriate way. No, I really mean that. So my comment about, I don't think the Brown thing has been a burden for us is also because I haven't been in a situation where I've been remote, wanting to participate and trying to figure out what the very strict guidelines are that would actually work counter to the notion of being inclusive. You know,
Okay.
I
So
just want to
thank you for raising that. And I think that helps me want to say again, I'm going to be interested in the points of clarification that come through this process. And I'll bring back to the committee how that evolves so that we can continue to weigh these interests, right? The interests of being compliant with rules that matter and transparency with making it possible for people to engage. And so we will find that balance together with more information.
In the meantime, then, I have a question. So it used to be possible for a committee member to attend by Zoom as a resident and not vote, but basically participate as any resident might. So would that be possible going forward, that you could do everything except vote if you're a committee member and you could only join by Zoom? Right, but if there's otherwise a quorum and can't vote, yeah. Sort of demoted to a resident. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Good question. Okay, so I don't know who's responsible for 60, and I know that Betsy had some thoughts. When this got agendized, Terry, did you have something specific in mind?
Betsy and I had talked about it, and we had realized that right now, this is understandably the talk of the town, that there are elements to it which I had not frankly fully appreciated, like this adjacent. I can't remember what the exact terminology is it for the housing in lieu of concept. Include, yeah, exactly. That might help the town address housing element, but I am acknowledging I don't completely understand the particulars of that. But because these things were coming up, and because there's so much sensitivity about how efforts to address the housing requirements for our town might impact potentially adversely open space, I thought it was important that we intentionally be up to speed and involved in both the direct and indirect, like this inclusionary housing thing, in the event that it might directly impact open. So just acknowledging feels like it could be really relevant and important. I'm not yet sure exactly how. And I know Betsy had thankfully listened in on some of that.
If it would be appropriate, I think when Terry and I, when we first spoke, we were talking about the sunrise provision and the post-adoption plan that is now kind of taken the nomenclature of the sunrise provision. And that period is imminently upon us, whereby we need to either identify an alternate site for Dorothy Ford Park or what now seems more probable, since we've no one has yet come up with a site that satisfies the needs of the housing element in the way that Ford does. Alternatively, how we can reduce the incredible pressures that exist on Ford today, where it would take all 50 of the very lowest income housing units. The way that the in lieu inclusionary, and it's alternately called in lieu and inclusionary housing fund, which amounts to almost $4 million, 3.8 as of this year's budget. It came into the fold because two other committees have named subcommittees, both race and equity and the finance and audit committee named subcommittees for the in the housing fund that will then report to the town council's subcommittee on in lieu and inclusionary housing fund. The most recently, the finance committee met on April 25th and came up with a specific recommendation. They narrowed the field of options down to three options that they identified. And it was a larger field than three that they narrowed down to three. Were first, and this is in descending order of, so they eliminated two of the three. The two that they eliminated, or the three that they identified, were to spend the money on an alternate site to Dorothy Ford. The second one was to reduce the visual impact associated with 50 units on Dorothy Ford. And the third option that they thought the most promising was to spend $100,000 to afford an incentive subsidy equivalent to $100,000 to the developer, to any developer who currently was developing moderate or above income units, and incent them to make those low income units. The rationale for that was that it would add to the lower end of the spectrum, and it would be immediately available. And they consulted with Jeremy Dennis, a former town manager, and there was a priority placed on putting this money. We've had this money for a long time, with the rationale and putting this money to work more expeditiously with a value for them. And so that's sort of a report of where it stands now. And at that committee, I might have mentioned that without option A, it would essentially eliminate the possibility that open space committee would be identified and successfully acquire an alternate to Dorothy Ford Park. So it would be something of a premature death knell, in my opinion, to eliminate that. And there was really no conversation about option B being reducing the visual impact. So I advocated at at oral communications at the town council meeting, which happened on the succeeding day, that open space committee be afforded a seat at the table, or at least be able to pull together a recommendation here to afford to the subcommittee of town council.
And forgive me, I don't have a good understanding of what this subcommittee that you attended. I'm sorry. So I didn't the meeting that you just described.
The finance.
It's the finance committee. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Those recommendations go to the council?
They go to the subcommittee that will then take it to the council.
Right, so this is the subcommittee I was thinking of. So all of this is still going to the council, so it hasn't been decided.
And that subcommittee hasn't met. The
Okay.
council subcommittee.
Okay, so our concern right now is the recommendations out of finance
That
to
we-
the subcommittee.
Our concern right now, and you watch people's body language, and when I said when I offered comments during oral communication, Judith Pasco was taking notes, but nodding her head affirmatively. So perhaps there will be an opening for us to also contribute ideas for how the town council can consider spending the $4 million that sits in the inclusionary fund. And it seems to be burning a hole in some people's pockets, and this is coming up to the council quite rapidly as a part of the post-adoption plan. So I thought it was very much in our interest that we take this on and put it in.
And so how specifically would we become involved in that conversation as it stands now? The subcommittee hasn't met, but will meet to consider this.
We would do, I think in terms of the inclusionary funds, which is a hotter topic than I had imagined a couple weeks ago. I didn't realize that it was coming up this quickly. But because it represents, it affords us bigger options to identify parcels and come up with the money to buy them if they're there. One would like recommend that we go slow with, and this would be either done collectively here, we could collectively come together and come up with some recommendations that we would write out and send to the subcommittee that's meeting or to the town council, or we could nominate a subcommittee here today and let the subcommittee, Judith Haskell and Mary Huffey, know that we are ready to meet with them when they have those are the options.
What do people think about this?
I have a question. So you said there are two committees that have formed subcommittees on this topic. And one is finance and one is race and equity. Have they put forward some suggestions or have they reflected on the finance committee?
I don't know if that was at the invitation of the subcommittee. I don't actually think that the subcommittee of the council had even been created yet. So I think the ordering was that Jeremy and Lucy Neely as chair created the subcommittee and got formed, and then the subcommittee of the council formed. And so it's a little bit of a ad hoc approach.
But did you say that race and equity also has a subcommittee?
How
And
they
have-
formed, I have from the subcommittee, and I think Judy Murphy's on.
I was just wondering if they have recommendations as well. So it sounds,
So they will, but I
okay.
did-
Boy, a lot of subcommittees here.
I know.
So do we know when the subcommittee that is comprised of Mary and Judith is meeting?
Yeah.
I am grateful.
So it sounds like there's consensus that we need a subcommittee to get involved in this conversation. And so the subcommittee would asked to be included in conversations that are happening with other committees, subcommittees, with the council's subcommittee, and also would be coming, right? Did I get that right? So, but part of the work of that subcommittee might also be to be gathering, brainstorming ideas about possible uses of this money that would reflect our values and commitments as open space advocates. Yes? Because,
And it's interesting that you discussing today, the parties involved. It doesn't surprise me that they define purchasing protecting open space, focused on just supporting more house because that's kind of their part.
those are the interests of serving, yes.
Absolutely. However, our lens is open. I could see our difference with the council is to tackle the problem of supporting housing in conjunction with preserving. And investing those dollars, because if you take those dollars, and then you have, like farming the open spaces, is kind of the flip side of preserving the open spaces. That's a lot bigger that could do big things, not just the board, but if we're, thinking about the horse bigger site too. There's different ways, there is land. Preserving as much of it as we can. A different form of cultivation. So I could see that we could look at the same problem and come up with a different solution. And then,
Sure, I'm gonna think of this as the both and subcommittee.
absolutely.
Because that's
Not that we're at
probably,
odds with other folks, but that we have a different answers to the same set of interests.
yeah, great. This feels like a very important subcommittee to me. Does anybody want to volunteer to be on this subcommittee? It's a subcommittee, two people. Got it. Got it.
Gary's not here.
Mhm.
So,
Great. So can we, do we need to move to have a subcommittee? I can't remember if that's something. that we need.
And the subcommittee collective could be meeting soon. I mean, there was a real sense of momentum that I got, like, whoa, I'm gonna hop on this train. So I think that's true. I think that's
Okay, so there's some urgency with this committee. I'll happily do this with him. And we'll see if Gary, but we'll let Gary do it if he wants to do it because he's better connected and more knowledge. But I'll get behind him in position if he doesn't want to do it. Like that. Does that seem right? Okay.
Okay, I move that Lexi and Tushin form a subcommittee that open space will have included the other subcommittees in the meetings of the council's subcommittee on the housing element, the sunrise provision and alternative sites. Is that where we are? Yes.
And can we nominate Gary as an alternate in case whenever this meeting lands that someone has some unavoidable conflict? But he's not here to agree to it. So we need to vote for an alternate.
She actually named me, not Gary.
I
And then
know.
we'll
And
look at
then,
a
but
substitute.
then
now
the
then.
two of us have to both be able to attend, but if one of us couldn't, then we have to. Is that something that
Can the
we-
subcommittee have an alternate? I'll figure it out.
If one of you
We don't need a
Yeah,
vote.
all right,
Good.
so
Okay,
we have a
good.
motion. Do you have a second? Okay, super. Thank you very much, both of you, for that. And so, oh, right, there needs to be a vote. Yeah, I told you I would need help. Okay. Seems like a lot of us. Okay, great. So if anyone on this committee has ideas that the subcommittee should bring to that other group, that maybe send them to me since I'm on the subcommittee. I will be a collector of ideas. Bev, if you have any or know anyone who does.
And just when, aren't we still talking about possible alternate sites for the housing?
That would be one of them if you have them. You could send petition.
You could tell me now, or you could send it to me. What did you have in mind?
Maybe it's secret.
No?
Maybe you shouldn't tell me now.
I hate to do it
Okay,
because it's just an idea out there.
Okay,
I haven't
yeah.
pursued it in any way, but
I think we are on Zoom being recorded.
okay.
So let's talk about it again sometime.
All right. I'll look into it more.
That would be lovely. I would really appreciate
Okay.
that. Okay, good. Yes. All right. Do I ask now if there's anything else that the committee would like to talk about?
I would be happy to move to adjourn the meeting. We can't think of anything else that's a totally appropriate thing to do if they're ready.
We vote on adjourning?
Sure.
Shall we vote on adjourning?
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye. Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, former
Yes,
chair and new chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get better at it.
Hold on, I'm gonna- I'm gonna turn this on.
Okay, so we have
Thank you, Terry, for
adjourned
the
at
guidance.
8:48.
Okay.
I just-
I just have to write it down.